This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
The United States at war with Iran, strikes over the past few days in partnership with Israel. The death toll in Iran, more than 503 American service persons killed as well. 3 American fighter jets shot down, reportedly a friendly fire incident in Kuwait. And of course, folks around the world wondering how long will this last and what does it mean? Iranians, including here in Canada, many of them publicly celebrating the opportunity for regime change. It's one the American officials, including those in the White House, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, who you'll hear from in this episode, are encouraging Iranians to take advantage of an opportunity for regime change, even as the Americans clarified the war was not about ousting the government in Tehran. We'll get into this and other matters of the day, the top headlines, with Supriya Dwivedi, who, as you know, joins us the first episode of every week in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. We'll also be checking in more locally with our focus with Alberta Federation of Labour President Gil McGowan. They've put out a call to public sector workers across the province. It's time to protest, says Mr. McGowan and the AFL. He'll be hitting the road just moments after this Real Talk interview. He'll join me in our studio here in the historic Mercer Warehouse before this episode is up. Let's get to it. This episode is happening with presenting sponsorship from our friends at Hanson Distillery. We talked to you a lot about the whiskey, the moonshine, the vodka, the gin that has put Hanson Distillery on the map, but you know that they're also so very well known for their specialty liqueurs, and that includes a brand new one. This is Real Talk and Real Candied Milk Chocolate, everybody. We're about to show you the label and the label only because this product has not even yet hit the shelves. But this is one that'll tie into the power of nostalgia. Hanson Distillery's back at it, paying homage to Edmonton and a new limited release. It's Mini Yeggs. Yeah, that's right. Velvety milk chocolate and that crisp vanilla-dusted candy shell flavor, all in a silky smooth cream liqueur. They're making just 2,000 bottles of this, and they'll be hitting shelves next week, the second week of March. These are going to hop away faster than the Easter Bunny on a deadline, everybody. So you don't want to get left behind. You can get in touch with the distillery right now. You can make contact by way of their website, hansondistillery.com, or just pop in. Beautiful location, 174th Street, 111th Avenue, just north of Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. You'll also be able to find it in fine liquor stores across the province. Mini Yeggs is sophisticated, local, and dangerously indulgent. Hanson is proudly local, always original, made right here. Learn more at hansondistillery.com. So Supriya Dwivedi, in just a moment, the United States officially at war with Iran. And, of course, big implications here. You'll hear from the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. We'll bring you comments from American Vice President J.D. Vance and, of course, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney. But here's a portion of what the Commander-in-Chief himself, U.S. President Donald Trump, had to say to the American people just hours ago.
We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now, it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead. This wretched and vile man had the blood of hundreds and even thousands of Americans on his hands and was responsible for the slaughter of countless thousands of innocent people all across many countries.
We'll get to more on how long this could last, although let's be real, those prognostications oftentimes aren't worth much when it comes to matters of war like this, as we welcome back to the show former senior advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada, Supriya Dwivedi. Your thoughts as this unfolds. Oh, and by the way, good morning.
Good morning. I don't look, my thoughts as this sort of unfolds can, I guess, kind of be reduced to, well, what next, right? I think, I don't think anyone is really shedding a tear over the fact that the, Iranian leader has been disposed of. But I think the question kind of remains is, okay, well, what next? You mentioned the death toll in Iran, well over 500 people. There was a girls' elementary school that seemed to have been hit in Iran as well. So, quite a few children have now died. There is, as you mentioned, 4 U.S. soldiers that have died. Aircraft that has been shot at, that's been referred to as friendly fire. But I think for a lot of folks, it's like, okay, well, again, what next? The Secretary of War, and I hate even saying that, but the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, did say that they didn't really have a firm kind of timeline as to how long this could go on. So I think that's kind of just the question now is, how long does this go on for? What is the ultimate objective? How does the U.S. eventually see itself pulling out of the area? And, who fills the gap right now in the regime? Because, again, if you look at what the United States did in Venezuela, ostensibly they said they went in to dispose of Maduro and get rid of the Maduro's regime, but it is the same folks that are still in charge in Venezuela. And so the question now is, okay, so who's going to be in charge now in Iran?
Is that, in your mind, is that where the comparisons stop between Iran and Venezuela? It strikes me as though the United States, I don't know if I'd say has the blessing, but we'll hear from the Prime Minister in just a moment. Canada saying that they support the Americans in this one. It didn't sort of have that same tone when it came to the American action in Venezuela a number of weeks ago.
Didn't they say they supported them, or did they not say that? I honestly forget. I'm not trying to be cheeky.
Yeah, no, well, it sort of was more in Venezuela. It was like everybody was kind of wondering what the hell was going on and what the Americans were doing there, and everybody just sort of figured, I'm obviously analyzing this very casually as a civilian, but people were kind of like, the Americans want the oil. They're going in to get the oil. And on this one, I think everyone, including the Prime Minister of Canada, is basically saying, as a matter of fact, Johnny, why don't we jump ahead to that? We'll jump ahead to the Carney clip. We'll bring that in just a second. Canada basically saying, listen, like they're trying to develop nukes. There seems to be a lack of consensus on how close Iran was towards that. But in this case, Canada essentially saying that the United States has Canadian support on this, despite the fact that Canada was not notified. I mean, why would Canada be notified? Yeah. And Foreign Affairs Minister Anand this morning saying that, there's no expectation that Canadian troops will be involved. Let's get to what the Prime Minister had to say, Supriya, and then we'll get your take on it. Sure. Here's Prime Minister Mark Carney just a short time ago.
Canada's position on the developments in the Middle East remains clear. The Islamic Republic of Iran is the principal source of instability and terror throughout the Middle East. It has one of the world's worst human rights records and must never be allowed to obtain or develop nuclear weapons. Canada and our international partners have called consistently upon the Iranian regime to end its nuclear program, including at the G7 summit in Kananaskis and with the United Nations reimposition of sanctions this past September. We've sanctioned over 250 Iranian entities. We've listed the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist entity. And despite numerous diplomatic efforts, Iran has neither fully dismantled its nuclear program, halted all enrichment activities, nor ended its support for regional terrorist proxy groups. Canada stands with the Iranian people in their long and courageous struggle against this oppressive regime, and we reaffirm Israel's right to defend itself. Canada supports the United States acting to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to prevent its regime from further threatening international peace and security. And the Canadian government urges the protection of all civilians in this conflict.
Okay, so that's the Prime Minister. Your thoughts on, every word there is strategic, of course.
Yeah.
What do you read into it?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't think the the prime minister is ever gonna come out and, poke the Trump administration in the eye just for the sake of poking them in the eye. And I'm not suggesting, that any other prime minister would do the same, but I think what we're talking about here in terms of what Carney is saying is completely consistent with, longstanding Canadian policy, right? And I think it makes sense, but I still don't think it answers the question of what next. I'm not suggesting that the prime minister is the one to have to answer that question, but I think that that question still looms. And if you look at some reporting from the CBC. I think it was Murray Brewster who reported this out yesterday. But according to his sources, I mean, it's highly likely that at least some Canadian military members would have been involved in the planning or coordination of these airstrikes on Iran, just because of the fact that we often have Canadian military members that go on exchange with the United States, right? So we don't yet have clarification as to whether or not there were Canadian military members that were involved in this. I'll be interested to see if that's something that ever really gets fully answered. But I think for Canadians, particularly Canadians that are, members of the Iranian diaspora, I mean, right now the mood is celebratory, right? I mean, nobody is going to shed tears over a dictatorship that was, brutally oppressing their own people. If anybody is, friends or family friends with folks that still have family in Iran, they'll know, arbitrary jailings, arbitrary beatings, people get disappeared quite regularly. So with respect to the human rights abuses, I mean, it's absolutely true that Iran was, no friend to human rights and to their own people. So I still just think it's like, okay, what next? Like once there's a power vacuum, right? It's not as though only the good guys tend to get in place in power.
Hey, just to follow up on my question around Venezuela. So here's what Global Affairs Canada had put out. This was on the 3rd of January. Says Minister Nunn at that time, since 2019, when Canada closed its embassy in Venezuela, we've refused to recognize any legitimacy of the Maduro regime and have opposed its repression of the Venezuelan people, including persecution of dissenters, political leaders opposed. In keeping with our long-standing commitment to uphold the rule of law and to democracy, Canada stands by the people of Venezuela and their desire to live in a peaceful and democratic society. Canada also calls on all parties to exercise restraint and uphold international law. Then it goes on to say Canada stands ready to assist Canadians in Venezuela. So there was no reference to the United States, no reference to President Trump, no reference to the military action there. I'm not trying to draw direct lines and direct parallels. It's just interesting. I mean, if you look at early 2026, on the Americans list, the to-do list, these are two pretty big ones, and obviously Iran is huge. The Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, delivering, I mean, I don't know how you characterize this. It's just a completely different way of doing things. That's one way to put it. But here's what he had to say, I guess, in serving notice, not just to dissenters in the Middle East, but around the world. Here's Secretary Hegseth.
It took the 47th president, a fighter who always puts America first, to finally draw the line after 47 years of Iranian belligerence. He reminded the world, as he has time and time again, being an American means something unbreakable. If you kill Americans, if you threaten Americans anywhere on earth, we will hunt you down without apology and without hesitation, and we will kill you.
This is pretty wild statement.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild statement. I would say completely in line with what we've heard from this particular administration. But look, there's going to be a lot of folks that may not have been fully on the MAGA train that hear that kind of a statement and they go, fuck yeah, finally, somebody's standing up for American lives, right? So I think there's definitely, homegrown constituency that is, would laud that sort of messaging. But again, we still have the question of what next. Like, if it's not an endless war and you're not committing to a time frame and you're not committing to clear strategic objectives that you need to achieve, and then you're gonna get out of Dodge. I think there's a lot of reason to be worried, particularly if you look at the U.S.'s track record when it comes to deposing of leaders in the Middle East.
So what do you think for Canadians that are going to be watching this story? I mean, with the rest of the world as well. Obviously, we're going to see what's happening here. Iran under attack right now from Israel and the United States, but it's something that'll affect stability in the Middle East. It's already affecting oil prices. It's going to, anything like this will affect markets, sometimes in a big way. And that's certainly the case here. What's the average Canadian supposed to take away from this? What's the appropriate response from Canada? How do you assess what you've heard from Minister Anand and the Prime Minister at this point? And what would you expect over the next few days conversations are going to look like in the PMO? Well, keep in mind the Prime Minister himself on a pretty huge mission right now. We'll talk about India in just a second, but what would you expect to see over the next few days?
I mean, I'd imagine that there are going to be quite a bit of folks asking Canadian officials that still have family in Iran for, what the latest is and what the advice is. I'd also imagine that there's going to be quite a bit of conversations with respect to Canadian officials as well as other Gulf states that are kind of caught in the middle of this, right? Folks would have seen on social media over the weekend that there were, hotels in Dubai, for example, that were getting hit with like shrapnel. There are some reports of targets in Saudi Arabia also being hit. This is going to have a lot of fallout and different reverberations throughout the region. And I think the number one prime sort of directive for any Canadian government is ensuring that Canadians are safe in this. So it'll be interesting to see how the Canadian government is communicating to the folks that are, kind of caught in the middle of this on the ground in those areas. And it makes things, difficult when we don't have proper, fully set up consular services in Iran because, they're a rogue state and we didn't want to have full diplomatic relations with them, which I'm not saying is wrong. That makes perfect sense. But in situations like this, it does make things a touch more difficult when you're trying to keep Canadians safe.
Yeah, right. There's kind of like the theory around all of this, and then there's the logistics of all of it as well. And sometimes those are two different conversations. In our live chat, powered by Park Power, Cliff says it would be nice to be able to implement a true democracy in Iran. Ken K says, FIFA Peace Prize winner, Nobel Peace Prize thief. What do you think this does to the founder and the chair of the Board of Peace? I know who was it? I think it was Saturday Night Live said on Weekend Update, the Board of Peace grew bored of peace. And I've heard that joke a few times, but is it ironic, or at the same time, I guess you kind of look at this and say, hey, listen, he's trying to depose. I mean, we're trying to ensure that Iran doesn't get its hands on nukes. Maybe that is a move toward peace.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's what they said about Saddam's too, no? About weapons of mass destruction. So I don't know. I say this as somebody who was like 17 when when the invasion of Iraq happened, right? It was like March of 2003 or something. So I very much grew up distrustful of U.S. official reasons that are given for invasion. And I think there's a whole generation of us that look at past instances of the U.S. getting involved in the Middle East and, have legitimate questions about, okay, well, what's the exit strategy? And when you do exit, what's next? And again, if you're looking at Venezuela as an example, the baddies are still there. The good guys haven't really taken over. So it remains to be seen what gets, put up in the absence of the quote-unquote supreme leader.
Yeah, Marie in our chat says Carney made a huge mistake saying that he supports this. We got some F-bombs flying toward the Prime Minister from Yttrium and Meta Modern. Les says, I remember the days when Trump bragged about getting military out of the Middle East. There's an interesting clip making the rounds. I think it was from 2021 where Trump's talking about Joe Biden at that time and says, let me tell you what's going to happen. The president's going to start a war in Iran because he can't negotiate and he's terrible. Ken K, Super Chat Ken here says, why would Canada be notified? He says, well, I mean, I guess if the U.S. was following international law, Canada would be notified through the UN. That's how war notification used to work. This would have congressional approval as well. It does hasn't, although perhaps more details on that during congressional briefings coming up on Tuesday. We're talking to you on a Monday here with Supriya. Marie goes on to say, you don't hear much about Ukraine right now, do you? Horse Lake Ranch says, I love seeing the far left and the right coming together. Look at Donald Trump bringing people together. And then there's a lot of comments here as well, like Jordan's says this is Operation Epstein Fury. Of course, the operation dubbed Epic Fury by the Americans, Epstein Fury. Could this be just a big distraction from the Epstein files, or is that too wag the dog?
I don't know. Why not? Right? In any other instance, I would probably say, yeah, probably too wag the dog. But with this administration, yeah, like, again, why not? Because I mean, in the lead up to this, there was quite a bit of focus on some of the new documents that had been released in relation to the Epstein files. So I don't know. Like, if you had asked me this a few months ago, I would have said probably not. But now it's getting harder and harder to definitively say that one doesn't have anything to do with the other, right?
Yeah, Tracy says authoritarians going after more authoritarians to take oil. It's black gold for them. Feel Good Friday says, I personally know 5 Iranians, and they're all thrilled with this action. Yeah. What should we say to them? I mean, it's a huge deal for people. I mean, there's celebrations in Canadian streets. There's celebrations in Tehran. Yeah. There's celebrations around the world. Meantime, how about this from American Vice President J.D. Vance? Just any opportunity to take a swipe at a predecessor of Trump. Here's what J.D. Vance had to say about this.
I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives. So this is not going to be some long, drawn-out thing. We've got in, we've done the job of setting their nuclear program back. We're going to now work to permanently dismantle that nuclear program over the coming years, and that is what the president has set out to do. Simple principle. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. That has animated American policy over the past 130 days. It's going to continue to be a driving force of our policy in the Middle East for the next 3.5 years.
Michael says they've been saying that Iran's 2 weeks away from nukes since the 1990s. Should we just stop making a big deal about this administration dragging previous administrations through the mud and just allow them to normalize it? There used to at least be some sort of, I don't know if I'd say reverence, but at least some residual respect for presidents past.
I mean, I think that flew out the window a long time ago. No, Ryan?
Yeah. I'm not surprised. I guess I play it to put it on the record, but I'm not expecting something profound from you on this. To me, it's you didn't hear President Obama talk about W like that. You didn't hear W talk about Clinton like that. You didn't hear Clinton talk about Nixon like, do you know what I mean?
I mean, I think because they were at least somewhat normal. I don't think Trump is normal, right? I don't think he has like the normal kind of human affects that we like to see in leaders. And I agree with you. I don't think we should get to a point where this is, where we kind of like brush it off and it's normalized. It's like, oh, well, what do we expect him to say? Of course he's going to say that. But it's like at the end, we can't keep getting, I don't know, like outraged over it, I guess, because at the end of the day, it's like it's not healthy for anybody's heart to get continually like angered at something that is just going to keep happening, right? Like this certainly not the last time that either the vice president or the president is going to show, very little respect to past U.S. presidents. Supriya
Dwivedi joining us in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Canada's Prime Minister is being criticized for not availing himself to media. His schedule, obviously some changes as a result of what's been happening here over the past couple of days. I want to ask you about that and the India mission that he's on. Supriya's been keeping us in the know on that file, the Canada-India file, including allegations around foreign interference and what it means for you. More on that in just a moment. These conversations on Real Talk happen with the support of Athabasca University. There's no better time than now to take that degree or master's program you've been thinking about. Check out athabascau.ca for more information and to join learners across Canada. If you've been considering going back to school, AU is Canada's open university, serving students coast to coast with 35 online master's programs, doctorate programs as well, and the only commute is to your device. AU is designed to fit your life for ambitious people across Canada and beyond. AU offers flexible approaches to higher education. Learn more about the AU Advantage today by visiting athabascau.ca. Our friends at Friesen Brothers, of course, it was 15% off grocery purchases of $75 or more yesterday. That was Sunday, March 1st. Hopefully you took the heads up last week here on Real Talk. They've always got something going on at Friesen Brothers, including coming up March 7th and 8th at all Friesen Brothers Fresh Market stores and High Prairie, a Filipino feast. Your chance to enjoy authentic Filipino favorites for just $25 per person, all you can eat, plus a 12-ounce Sagat Gulaman drink with your meal. An authentic experience at Friesen Brothers. Learn more at friesen.com/Filipino Feast. We're encouraging those of you through the month of February, of course, we focused on Heart Month, but through the year, who have benefited from the incredible care at the C.K. Huey Heart Center at the Royal Alexandra Hospital, to consider the C.K. Huey Heart Center in your family's philanthropy goals as you make your donation decisions through the year. Of course, the C.K. Huey Heart Center serving more than a third of Canada's geographic region with incredible, innovative, life-saving cardiac care. You can learn more about the work being done there at the Heart Center and across the board at the Royal Alexandra Hospital by visiting royalalex.org, celebrating 125 years, an unbelievable legacy, again, at royalalex.org. And our friends at North Road Investment Council reminding you they are the steady hand and a studied voice to guide you through wealth and investing. Just last week, Carrie Williams from North Road joining us to talk about AI and how it's factoring in not just to markets, not just to the workplace, but how it should factor into your investment decisions. You know, for a lot of folks, our level of understanding of AI is, let's be honest, entry level, and that's why we recommend a conversation with the team at North Road. Life's financial journey, including understanding new tech, doesn't always follow a straight path. You can book a consultation today, maybe get a second set of eyes on your current investment strategy. If that's the case, North Road offers an hourly rate and it's discounted. When you get in touch with them and let them know you heard about it on Real Talk, you can connect with the team today at northroadic.com. Supriya Dwivedi, our guest. Supriya, we'll talk about Kearney in India and what's going on there and what you're paying close attention to. But first, I wanted to get to journalist Robert Fife's post. He's one of many that have pointed out here that Kearney has canceled, it would have been today, his first press conference since the India trip began nearly a week ago. The PMO citing lengthy meetings in New Delhi that have strained the schedule. Fife, a veteran journalist, of course, says the PM hasn't taken a question from Canadian journalists since last Wednesday, when a government official said that India was no longer conducting foreign interference in Canada. The statement was immediately challenged by national security experts. Fife says in New Delhi, talking about today, the PMO told journalists accompanying the Prime Minister any delay to accommodate a news conference would affect the Air Force's ability to leave India and head to Australia because of limits on air crew hours. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. Does it matter?
So, yeah, I think your last question is the right one. Does it matter? Probably not. But, you know, in defense of the Prime Minister's office here, I will say that it is likely that they were strained in terms of schedule, right? And you don't have an unlimited amount of time to be able to get the Prime Minister's aircraft out of Delhi airspace. And I would also just say that anybody who's traveled to India and has flown in and out of New Delhi, I mean, even at the best of times, your flight can be significantly delayed because of smog warnings and the like. So I fully accept that sort of explanation, but I mean, whose fault is it for waiting until the very last second to have any sort of press availability? And I think ultimately that falls on the Prime Minister's office for not making the Prime Minister available available to answer questions, because there are now a ton of legitimate questions as to why a senior Canadian official would say in a technical briefing that India was no longer conducting foreign interference or was no longer involved in transnational repression, when that flies in the face of what the RCMP has said. It flies in the face of what CSIS has said. It flies in the face of what the public safety minister has said. And it flies in the face of what the national security and intelligence advisor to the prime minister has said. So I think Canadians are owed an explanation from the prime minister.
So do you think it was, again, I'm asking you to speculate, but I mean, was it kind of loose lips? Was it a senior official misspeaking? I mean, it's a hell of a thing to say and get wrong if it's wrong. And if it's right, then everybody you just named, including CSIS and senior intelligence officials in the RCMP, are wrong.
It's not right. It's not right. Let's just put that to bed. It's definitely not right. The senior official misspoke, right? And I think we should just put that to bed. The question of why they misspoke, that's a good one. I cannot get into this official's head. If I had to guess, and if I had to, surmise what happened, I think what happened was, in that technical briefing, there are a bunch of PCO officials, so officials from the Privy Council office, that aren't necessarily used to dealing with Canadian journalists in like a press conference type of setting where you're being peppered with questions nonstop. And this official misspoke, broke under pressure. And, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but the response from the Canadian official was something along the lines of, I do not think we would be taking this trip if this kind of, activity was still continuing, referring to the foreign interference. Well, by the very extension of that logic, right, that means that China is also no longer interfering in Canada's domestic politics. And it also means that China is no longer conducting any sort of transnational repression for the diaspora here, which I think we can all safely say is BS, right? So again, I do not know why the official felt the need to say that. I'm going to guess it was because they were not used to being peppered with questions by journalists. And now it's on to the Carney government to clean this up. And you did see that with the public safety minister coming out. You also, more recently, Minister Anand did say something to the effect of, those are not the words I would have chosen to describe the activity. But quite frankly, we need some senior member, whether that's Minister Anand, whether that's the public safety minister, but it should ideally be the prime minister himself, to answer a bunch of questions from journalists on this, because we have more questions than we have answers right now.
We often see Donald Trump, typically when you and I are talking, we'll often play clips, these sort of almost impromptu media scrums aboard Air Force One. Are Canadian journalists not ever flying with the PM, or would that be a
They are.
one-off?
They're just in the back of the plane.
Yeah, so why can't he just walk back past that first class curtain and talk to them for 10 minutes?
He could. He very well could. The one thing I will say that is perhaps a little bit different than Air Force One is that journalists don't have access, or at least they didn't. Perhaps they do now. But in my day, they didn't have access to Wi-Fi. So you wouldn't get that, often you'll see like a cell phone video footage of the president kind of going back, speaking to journalists, and that's what gets uploaded to social media or what have you. So I don't think that would be possible, but certainly he can go back to the back of the plane and take a bunch of questions if he wanted to. I think the reality is he doesn't want to, because he doesn't want to be in that position. And again, I am sympathetic to the fact that if you wouldn't want the prime minister to contradict the senior official while he's on Indian soil, right? I could certainly see the folks around him advising him not to do that. But I mean, now that he's in the air en route to Australia, answer some questions, dude. Yeah.
Meantime, India's High Commissioner to Canada says there was never a problem, you guys. CTV News is reporting this. You can see it here. Abigail Beeman covering the story. Is this a scenario where Canadians should expect India to come clean and say, hey, moving forward, we acknowledge that there was some inappropriate dabbling, influence, and maybe even a few targeted hits in Canada, but we'd like to move forward? Or is this the sort of thing where India is obviously never going to cop to this?
I don't think India under Modi will ever cop to this. And we've seen from the jump, there have been consistent denials. From the Indian side of things, None of this ever occurred. It was all completely made up by the RCMP and by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. That's obviously not the case. In October of 2024, the RCMP confirmed that the allegations against agents of the Indian government included not just the assassination of Mr. Najjar, but as well as a bunch of other crimes that were occurring in Canada, including homicides, extortion, and arson. So we've known about this for quite some time, and to hear the Indian side of things, continually gaslight Canadians is quite frankly offensive. And it's also offensive that all we've heard from the Carney government thus far has been silence on this. Like, let's not forget, the Indian High Commissioner back in October of 2025 went on with Vashi Kapellos and told her that the allegations by the RCMP were absurd and preposterous, right? And then went to suggest that it was up to the RCMP to essentially apologize to India for making up these claims. We didn't get a single repudiation of those remarks from either Minister Anand or the Prime Minister. And we have to ask ourselves why that is. In my day, call me old-fashioned, but if you had a representative of a foreign government go on a Canadian news program to tell a Canadian audience that the Canadian National Police Force had lied and made up allegations, it would prompt a reaction from the Canadian government to repudiate those remarks. And we've never gotten those.
Before we go, I want to flag something for our audience, and this is wild. People can check out meo.ca, this media ecosystem reporting from about a week ago that shows the headline of the report: conspiratorial claims, institutional distrust in Canada's online ecosystem. National Observer has taken this on, and here's the summary by way of a headline. From Rory White's piece, 100 accounts, we're talking social media accounts, 100 of them are behind the majority of conspiracy theory content in Canada. A member of Real Talk's advisory board, Ann Castleman, who does remarkable journalism across the country, reached out and she said, I'm sure that this is on Supriya's radar. She loves catching you on the show weekly. She says, these findings are wild. 100 online users accounting for nearly 70% of conspiratorial posts, capturing 90% of views, 86% of likes, 100 users, 100 behind more than 2/3 of conspiracy-laden posts in Canada. That is nuts.
It is. And so first and foremost, Anne, I love you. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, but it was already on my radar because I do think it's, to Anne's, qualifier, it is wild, right? You've got 100 users that are responsible for almost 70% of the, conspiratorial posts that are found online. And then again, in the, breaking water is wet category, you found that Twitter, or X, is the most conspiratorial social media platform out there. 87% of the folks that are putting out these claims, they're coming from influencers, and Twitter is the biggest culprit, or X is the biggest culprit. So we have a minority that is quite vociferous in their conspiratorial claims, and they're kind of capturing the attention economy, if you will, of all of the users that are on these posts. Because again, we've known for quite some time that the way these algorithms tend to work is that they're optimized for engagement. And do you know what tends to engage people? Conspiratorial posts. It doesn't mean that you're looking at it and you're favoriting it or you're liking it and you're like, yay, conspiracy theories, but it likely makes you a little bit mad. It may make your eyeballs linger a little bit longer on the post. So you're, reading it, and that counts as an engagement. So guess what? It's going to keep pummeling you with that sort of content. And so this is the way these platforms work. They're designed to keep us engaged. And so a lot of grifters have figured out that the way to do that is to either make people, really angry online, or at least make them go, huh. And conspiracy theories do that.
Anne asked a really interesting question. and I want to put this to you. She says, I wonder what role our well-intentioned but supremely undermining to democracy federal ban, the no news links on socials ban, has done to give influencers so much clout. Now, technically, this has been a response from big tech, right? As a result of Canada with
For
like
Meta. It's really just
basically
Meta.
for Meta. But her suggestion, and I think there's some intuition behind it, in that it has given influencers much more clout, in that the fact-checked so-called mainstream, the traditional journalism product is not being shared on the same platforms where much of that conspiratorial type information is rampant and viral.
Yeah, I think that's a fair criticism, right? I mean, the second that the Online News Act kind of was up and running and Meta decided to take their ball and go home and not pay into Canadian journalism, was a moment that I think a lot of people suspected was going to lead to some sort of information vacuum, right? I would point out that the banned links or what have you don't apply to other social media platforms. It really does only apply to Meta. So, to Instagram and to Facebook. But the reality is that right now, if you're going on any number of social media platforms, even if they do allow links, the algorithms are still optimized for engagement. So, if you are a grifter, you're going to go towards where the grift is. And the grift right now is to promote bullshit and conspiracy theories. It's not going to be to promote news or to fact check. So even if you had two somewhat comparable, accounts, both on Twitter, one that only really did factual promotion of work and one that did conspiracy content, the conspiracy content is going to get a lot more engagement.
Always good to see you, my friend. Thank you for doing this. We'll look forward to a week from today where we'll do it all again with much more, I'm sure, to talk about what 7 days will bring.
Looking forward to it, buddy. Talk soon.
Okay, good to see you. That's Supriya Dwivedi joining us first episode of every week in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Let us know what you think about that last story in particular. I don't know if you're surprised by that or not, Johnny. I like, on one hand, I think that it's shocking to learn. Like, I'm not surprised at all that there's this relatively tight consortium. Like, if you look at 100 accounts,
sure, yeah.
Considering how many accounts there are, how many people there are, and the amount of influence those 100 accounts have. It's not surprising. At the same time, it's shocking when you look at the power, and I think that reports like this and flagging it, Supriya taking us into it, are important. I think perspective is so huge when we see stuff like this.
Yeah, we see stuff shared on social media and we think, oh, maybe these people have the same way of thinking. But I was reading articles just 2 weeks ago about how you can literally use AI, ChatGPT, to run through Twitter accounts. And you think people are posting similar opinions, but the way they're written, AI can just analyze it and be like, this is 99% most likely the same person posting to multiple accounts over and over, trying to make it look like a consortium or a big group of people all have a certain opinion. Yeah. And maybe they do, but like, especially online, a lot of that is perpetuated by the same accounts over and over. And I was not surprised to hear that 100 accounts. I thought it would be less than that. I mean, come on.
Yeah, MetaModern says. And MetaModern, by the way, I want you to know I'm reading this in particular because you use in your comment one of my favorite words of all time. It's not appropriate for elementary school, everybody, if the family's gathered around right now listening. But MetaModern says, at least those 100 accounts are probably getting paid. The chuckle fucks that are repeating the kind of stuff for free are the real losers. That from MetaModern.
And that's the goal of the accounts, right? Is to post as many places as you can to somehow conjure up people's opinion to be the same as yours. And the ultimate goal is to get that opinion shared. And that's where you see, like, I'll see the most ridiculous stuff that I'm like, all you had to do was take 1 second, not even AI, just Google and fact check this and it's wrong. But then I look at the shares and I'm like, this was shared 120,000 times. Like, people didn't even bother to check.
Well,
it's
and
just
when
been spread everywhere.
And I don't care how confident you are in your belief or how sort of steadfast you are in your position on something. when you're being walloped, and we must point out that on social media, and maybe we should differentiate between platforms, because, you know, your experience on TikTok or Instagram could be will be dramatically different than on X or Facebook or what have you. You know, LinkedIn is much different than X, as an example. But when the algorithm starts kicking and the bots start kicking in and the trolls are fully firing, and you find yourself under attack, under fire, when you are being victimized in a public feeding frenzy, it can prompt even the most confident person to wonder, if only for a moment, am I wrong about all this? Are all these people right?
Oh my gosh.
Is Alberta better off as a sovereign nation?
Well, what you're saying right now is literally what those 100 accounts, what those bots are made to do. They're
music to their ears.
Question every day when you get up, you're taking a sip of coffee, you have your opinions, you have your morals, and then you go to Instagram, X, wherever, and the bots question it. They make you question everything you've ever thought, and they use it with a lot of stuff, a lot of smoke screens, a lot of things that aren't true. If you post 10 things and only one is true, but that one thing that is true gets shared a lot, then you start to believe that account. You're just going to take in all the crap they feed you.
Yeah. On India, Tracy C. says it's really tricky, you know, with the increase of violence here, she says, particularly in Western Canada, with allegations of Indian foreign interference. Says we do need trade, obviously. But if the guilty are from India, she says the Prime Minister will have to address this. That from Tracy C. Others of you sharing your thoughts on Donald Trump and Iran. Deaf Tiger in our chat, what's up, says Trump is about power. He's about money. He's doing this, the hard work, with the help of the deadliest military on planet Earth, and we're all forced to watch. Deaf Tiger says we can only voice our opinions.
Yeah, and not to, you know, be a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, a lot of people, it's all over online, are thinking he's shoring up all the oil. I mean, Venezuela, Iran. I mean, and let's be clear. I'll agree with Supriya. Like the supreme leader of Iran, like the things going on in Iran are they're horrible. People are not living well there, and you can see that now. We even mentioned it right off the top. I'm glad you said it. Because it's not like Venezuela where people were torn down the middle. Like people are cheering this on. They want to be out from under that regime.
Well, and
right?
I think the one common thread was that, you know, we heard and a bunch. I remember Sharon Carr, other commentators on our show, right around the beginning of January. It was like our first shows back from New Year's, and all hell's breaking loose. And you remember a lot of people saying, "Listen, we're not shedding tears for Maduro.
No,
we're not shedding tears for what was happening or how Venezuelan people were being oppressed by their own government, not an elected government, obviously." So there is that commonality, but I think that there were questions around what the American motivation was in Venezuela. Whereas here, I mean, I just think that it's noteworthy what the Prime Minister had to say, what Mark Carney had to say about this, essentially saying that they support American action here and oppose, you know, obviously Iranian possession of nuclear weapons, as would 99.9% of people on planet Earth. That is a important difference between the two, and I don't think that it's necessary or intelligent to try to draw a bunch of lines and parallels between Venezuela and Iran, but one of them is, like you've noted and others, what happens next? Where do we go from here? We have examples throughout history, including when Americans have gone in and taken out problematic leaders and then left really no structure or plan in place for what happens next. And that will be one of these, and time will tell.
Yeah, and the thing in everyone's back of our minds is like, yes, okay, let's roll back, you know, oppressive governments. Let's let, like in Iran, let's let women drive and all these things. We know that the world needs democracy. The world needs to be freer, especially on that side of the map. But what we're all thinking in the back of our heads, Ryan, I've seen it in the chat a million times today. I've seen it all weekend on X. When is the last time the U.S. has intervened and done a regime change and it's worked out, especially for the people who live there?
In our chat, you continue to chime in. A lot of you talking about oil prices, a lot of you talking about economic implications. We'll let you know, obviously, As the days and weeks unfold here, we'll continue to get voices, in particular, experts on Middle East politics, experts on the energy economy as well. Michael here is getting restless in our chat, wonders, Real Talk, will you be getting an interview with Pierre Poilievre soon? Michael, we would recommend that you ask Pierre Poilievre's
Door's
team
wide
that,
open.
not us. The door is open. We are consistently and regularly in contact with them. It would be good to hear from the leader of the official opposition. Anubia says, I think that bots account for the majority of engagement these days. I think depending on the platform, I would agree with you, in particular on X for sure. And how about this from Cassie Lake, just letting us know where they find their peace as we prioritize Sundays as family time. No social media, no phones. We do something together and have conversation around Sunday dinner. That sounds incredible.
That's really nice.
I
And
love
that's very
that.
wholesome and that's great for you. But unfortunately, when a war breaks out,
Maybe that's why you need
some
it.
of us don't have a choice.
That's when you need it more than ever, right? Ambustion says, why do we draw a parallel then, if not Venezuela, from the last time an Iranian leader was taken out, basically created modern Islamic fundamentalism? Les pointing out 5 years ago yesterday says he was a guest on Real Talk. Isn't that great? Man, we're starting to take a look back on the legacy of Real Talk. Johnny, as a matter of fact, coming up in Positive Reflections, which will be in 20, 30 minutes from now, we have a note from Cheryl about a past episode of the show that inspired her family. That'll be our Positive Reflection, presented by our friends at Solar by Kubi. That's coming up. On the other side of this break, the president of the Alberta Federation of Labour, he and his team have announced a day of protest. It's not for a few months, but they're getting everybody rallying, and this is all part of their Fight Back campaign. We're going to ask Gil McGowan about that coming up in just a couple of seconds. Before we get to Gil, our friends at the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce reminding you that they've got a couple events coming up over the next while, as they always do. This is the place for making connections with other movers and shakers in business in the Metro Edmonton region. That includes their provincial budget summary and upcoming budget luncheon. If you want the quick hits, what matters, what changes, and what it means for Edmonton's business community, you can check out their Budget in a Blink post at edmontonchamber.com. A fast way to see what the budget means for your business. And if you'd like to be more involved, check out the events link on their website. On March 12th, they've still got a few tickets available for their annual provincial budget luncheon with Alberta's Finance Minister, Nate Horton. Nate Horner, rather. Horton. Do I have hockey on the brain? Horton, here's a who? Maybe getting the kids to bed? Apologies to the Finance Minister. We expect to speak with him ourselves in the next short while. Your chance to hear directly from Minister Horner. Rub shoulders with business leaders and decision makers from across Alberta. You can learn more about the benefits of membership with the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce by visiting edmontonchamber.com. A big shout out to our friends at UCAN Youth Services for the amazing work that they're doing helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. That includes their Road to Work program in partnership with big construction, in particular road building employers across the province of Alberta. Young people aged 18 to 24 are getting the basic skills and safety trainings necessary to enter construction, roadwork, and traffic safety sectors. You can learn more about the program on their website, ucan.ca. We're putting out the call to employers. If you work in the trades and if you're hiring skilled, motivated, entry-level employees, consider a partnership with UCAN Youth Services. A ton of big employers are doing it already and seeing huge return on that investment, and you're helping do good with these young people who, like we said, are as motivated as you'll ever see. We're proud to name UCAN Youth Services as a charity of choice for 2026. You can check out more at ucan.ca. And our friends at Play Alberta reminding you that Albertans are winning every single day on the Play Alberta app and at playalberta.ca with hundreds of different casino games to choose from. There's a winner every single day, and all of the revenue stays right here in the province of Alberta. You can download the Play Alberta app today for casino, sports, and lottery all in one app. You must be 18 or over to play. And of course, if you do gamble, please use your game sense. The Alberta Federation of Labour just a number of hours ago rolling out a new Fight Back Now campaign, inviting you to join the movement at afl.org. President Gil McGowan now joining us in our Real Talk studio in the historic Mercer warehouse. Welcome back.
Good morning, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Podcast subscribers to Real Talk would notice that the first Sunday of every month, they're receiving a bonus episode. You can also check it out on Real Talk's YouTube channel. If you just scroll down, you'll find episodes of Worker Agenda. This is a podcast series that we're promoting here. We're helping the Alberta Federation of Labour produce that, hosted by Omar Mualim, co-moderated by yourself and your colleague Corey Longo. Talk to us about what Worker Agenda and what this Fight Back Now campaign is all about. You guys are making noise.
We're making noise, and the two campaigns should be seen as a 1-2 punch. And we're sort of inspired by what we in the labor movement do at the bargaining table. Before every round of bargaining, we get our members together and we decide what demands we're going to make at the bargaining table. And then the second step, the second punch in the 1-2 punch, is we prepare to fight for those demands. So the worker demand, the worker demands that we're talking about in the podcast come from our own members, ordinary working people, public sector, private sector, who've come together and say, as a province, we're talking about a lot of things that don't really address the concerns that ordinary Albertans have. So what we've said is that we need to be talking about affordability and wages and public services and jobs in the economy, health and safety, and even democracy in the context of the power of working people. So we've put together a worker agenda, which is a list of our demands. And we've put it out for public discussion, and we talk about it in the podcast, which you've mentioned. But the campaign that we just launched now, Fight Back Now, is the second part of that 1-2 punch. We're demanding, but we're also going to stand behind those demands with a fight. And specifically, what we're talking about is organizing towards a province-wide day of protest, Friday, May 29th. And what we're hoping to do is give what I would describe as the silent majority of Albertans a platform to express their concern, their frustration, and yes, even their anger at the direction that our province is going, especially under the Daniel Smith UCP government. And so, people are angry and frustrated because what we're seeing from this government are things that no one voted for and that the vast majority of Albertans don't agree with. And so, for example, we've got a government that is talking about introducing 2-tier healthcare. At the same time, they're underfunding and understaffing the public healthcare system. We've got a government that's still talking about pulling Alberta out of both CPP and the RCMP against the express will of the majority of Albertans. We've got a government that is talking about continuing to use the notwithstanding clause to strip Albertans of their basic democratic rights, including the right to strike, which is how they used it against the teachers. We've got a government that's talking about sidelining the courts, which is a pillar of our democracy. And of course, we've got a government that's paving the way to a separatist referendum, and not just paving the way, they're actively supporting these conversations. So what we're saying, and I think what most Albertans would agree, is that we're on a direction that this government has no mandate for. And while they're focusing on all these things that we never voted for and the vast majority of us don't support, they're ignoring the things that Albertans are really concerned about. And those are the kind of things that we try to address in the worker agenda, like stagnating wages, like the affordability crisis, groceries, auto insurance, the power prices, a stagnant job market, the rise of AI and what it's going to mean for working Albertans. We have a government that just started a new session, and what are they talking about? They're talking about banning books in libraries instead of these things. And so what we're trying to do, we have this sense, and we hear it from our own members, we have this sense that there is a majority of Albertans who are not feeling heard, they're feeling frustrated, and they're very angry with the direction that the province is going. And so what we want to do on May 29th with the province-wide day of protest is to give that silent majority a platform to speak out, push back, and be heard. And I would actually suggest that what we're proposing is very much in line with the conversation you were having with your previous guest about online grifters and misinformation and how people are being, pulled down rabbit holes online, with platforms like X and Facebook and Instagram and Threads. What you guys were talking about was a recent study about showing that there's really only 100 accounts that are generating the vast majority of these conspiracies across the country, but especially here in Alberta. I would suggest that what we're seeing is, and honestly, it's been happening over the past decade or more, and pardon my language, but a bullshit bubble has been created in this province, and it's being used to weaponize the anger that especially working people are feeling in this province, and then turn that anger into political purposes. And what frustrates me as a representative for working people is A, that workers are being targeted by these online efforts, and B, they're instead of offering solutions, they're just pumping up the anger, and then they're turning that anger towards issues that are not really the most important ones. So for example, we should be talking about stagnant wages. We should be talking about grocery prices going through the roof. And actually now, especially in the context of the invasion, American and Israeli invasion of Iraq, we should be talking Iran. We should be talking about how this is going to drive up oil prices and how we as consumers are going to get gouged at the pump again, which is what happened in between 21 and 2023 when Russia invaded Ukraine, and it was one of the reasons that international prices went through the roof.
Alberta budget will look a little bit better, though.
It will on the positive side, but we all have to pay for gas at the pump. And actually, Ryan, just a few months ago, we at the Federation of Labour released a report called Exporting Profits that looked at that period in 2021 to 2023 and looked at what happened to oil prices during that period. They went through the roof, and our oil industry made record profits, $140 billion in profits, $140 billion of profits in just 3 years. And 75% of those profits went to the company shareholders, and 60% of those shareholders are outside of Alberta. So there was that big rushing sound of our wealth, because as Albertans, we own the resource, heading out of the province, right? And so one of the things that we're going to be recommending either today or tomorrow is for our government to introduce a windfall profits tax on our big oil companies, because these are unearned profits. It's just because the price of oil has gone up because of a war, right? And we missed our opportunity to capture those windfall profits last time in 2021 to 23. We shouldn't miss it this time.
When you talk about working people, who are you talking about?
I'm talking about anyone who works for a living. So I have the honor and privilege of representing workers in the public and private sector who are members of unions in this province. So we have about 170,000 members, and I'll just stress they are Albertans working in our communities, in our industries, from north to south, east to west. But when we talk about the worker agenda and how workers are getting screwed in this economy by wages that don't keep up with inflation, price gouging by big oligopolistic corporations at the grocery store, at the gas pump, I'm not just talking about our members. I'm talking about everyone who works for a wage, and that's 90% of the Alberta population. I mean, we have about 10% of working age people who are independent business owners and that kind of thing, but 90% work for a wage. And I would actually say even most of the business owners are in the same boat, because small business owners have a lot more in common with workers because they have to work hard to make a living. And even if you make $1 million a year, for example, Ryan, it'll take you 1,000 years to become a billionaire, right? And people like Elon Musk are now talking about earning $1 trillion in 1 year. That's the problem in the world right now. It's a billionaire-dominated economy, a billionaire-dominated society, and here in our little corner of the world, here in Alberta, we have a government that is on that side of the political fence, the MAGA side of the political fence, the side with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. And they are not working in the best interest of ordinary working people. They're trying to enlist working people as foot soldiers in their political campaigns. But that's why we're organizing this day of protest, is to give a platform to that silent majority of people who have legitimate concerns that are not being addressed by our government. Instead, we're getting a whole bunch of stuff that people never voted for and never asked for. So, that's our invitation. Not just to union members in this province, not just public sector, but private sector as well. Anyone who's frustrated with two-tier healthcare, more talk about pulling Alberta out of the CPP, anyone who's frustrated with a government that's paving the way for separatism, we're going to provide people a platform. And I also want to make it clear, we're not talking about a one-off demonstration on a Saturday in front of an empty building like the legislature. What we're talking about is mass protest across the province, in every community. And sometimes it'll be rallies, maybe it'll be marches, and we're inviting people to get on board with us early so they can help plan in their own communities. And basically, one of the frustrating things is that on our political stage here in Alberta, the oxygen has been sucked up by separatists and MAGA Northers who don't really speak on behalf of Albertans, and that needs to stop. And it goes to the point that you guys were talking about earlier in the previous segment about the efforts by these online disinformation grifters to give the impression that they speak on behalf of everyone. That's what's happening on our political stage here in Alberta right now. The separatists, the MAGA Northers, I would describe them as disreputable grifters. And one of the things that they're trying to do, both online and in the real world, is to suggest that all Albertans think like them. That's not true. And so with our day of protest, what we want to be able to show is have Albertans come out and say, you know what, my Alberta is Canadian. My Alberta is not MAGA North, and my priorities are not attacking immigrants or pulling out of CPP or introducing a two-tier healthcare. We just want an economy that works for people. And so we want to give people an opportunity to participate in that conversation. That's why we're creating the platform let's point out, it's a Friday, it's a work day. So we're asking people to come out over their lunch hours, with their time off, and we'll see what happens at that point. But what we want to do is give a platform for Albertans who feel unheard right now, but are frustrated and don't feel represented by the direction that the province is heading.
When you talk about working people, and when you talk about unions for that matter, a lot of folks will think of prominent unions because of significant memberships and the amount of time that they've spent in the headlines, much to some of their chagrin, I'm sure, including the teachers. Yeah. But you think of the teachers union, you think of the nurses union. Typically, you would think of unions that could have or do have adversarial relationships with the UCP government. But there's also many unions and many working people and many blue-collar people who support this government in a big way. Is a big part of this campaign trying to reach those folks, some of your own members even?
Oh, sure. I mean, in fact, one of our priorities is to reach out to people who did vote for the UCP and ask them to join us in demanding better. And I want to make it clear, this campaign is not partisan in the sense that we're asking people to vote for the opposition. In fact, the whole point of the worker agenda is to create a platform that I would even say a political platform that is independent from political parties, but that instead just focuses on what's a priority for working people. Because unfortunately, in our democracy, we've gotten to the point where most people they take our democracy for granted. It's something that they do once every 4 years when election time comes around, and they don't really think about it too much until maybe a month or two before the election, and they expect the parties to offer them like a menu. It's like, this is the conservative menu, this is the progressive menu. I'll choose between the two, right? And what we're saying is that none of our political elites are giving working people what they need right now. And what we're saying is it's through the Federation of Labour, the worker agenda, which I'll point out was developed and workshopped with ordinary working people from both the public and private sector. We've put together our own platform, and we're challenging all the parties, conservative and progressive, to make the worker agenda the actual agenda for Alberta, right? So that's our ask, that's our demand. But the fight through what we're calling the Fight Back Now campaign, which is designed to, organize towards the day of action on May 29th. Part of, it would be great if people at the May 29th rally said, you know what, we don't want either of the platforms that you have on offer. We actually want a platform that addresses real working people's issue. I'd love for people at the May 29th rallies to say, you know what we need in this province? We need the worker agenda. So I would encourage your viewers to take a look at the worker agenda. It's workeragenda.ca. If they want to sign up to help us organize in their communities towards the day of action on May 29th. We have a separate campaign website, fightbacknow.ca. Those two things is a 1-2 punch, the demand, the fight, and it's all designed to help us change our province in a way that better reflects where ordinary working Albertans' heads are at. And their heads are certainly not at, the key tenets of what I would describe as the grievance bubble, the grievance culture that conservatives in this province have been trying to build over the years, conditioning Albertans to blame everything on Ottawa, all these bullshit arguments, frankly, just to get people angry. Instead of being angry, let's have solutions that actually address our concerns so we can be less angry. Because that was the final thing I'm going to say. These grifters, they want you to be angry. They don't want to solve they don't want solutions to your problems. They want you to live in your problems and just continue to be angry. What we're saying is let's actually have policies that address the things that are making you angry, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what the worker agenda is about. And the Fight Back Now campaign, the May 29th day of public protests across the province is about making it clear that the majority of Albertans don't buy the bullshit anymore.
Yeah. Here you are, though, and I understand why you're doing it, but using words like demand and fight and, is this too adversarial of a relationship, labor versus the UCP for there to get anything done? I mean, when you talk about, suggestions or demands that you're going to be sending the province, a lot of people can imagine Rob Anderson or the Premier herself just laughing and ripping them up and throwing them in the recycling, right? I mean, what leads you to believe that this is the right approach?
Well, if you were to talk to most working class Albertans right now, and when I say working class, I mean everyone who works for a wage. So that might be, a wage or a salary. We're at a moment that demands fight, right? And whether it's the threat from south of the border with Donald Trump's MAGA administration, whether it's billionaire oligarchs in these concentrated companies in groceries or oil companies that are gouging us at the pumps or gouging us in the grocery stores, people are struggling, and look at the housing crisis. Like I've got three kids in their 20s, right? And when I was their age, I was thinking about buying my first house, which basically cost it was 3 times my annual income. Now we're talking about a basic house costing 7 or 8 times your family income.
Oh, at least.
So we're basically pricing a whole generation out of the middle class dream. And if that doesn't make you angry, and if that doesn't make you feel it's time to actually fight, so I'm not going to apologize for taking a more pugilistic approach. That's exactly what's appropriate at this moment. And I will point out that the language about fight this, fight that, that's exactly the language that Daniel Smith and Jason Kenney before her used to win successive elections. They said that, but instead of fighting for things to help actual working people in this province, they said we're going to fight against Ottawa. They turned, like a third of our whole province against the country. They conditioned them to be anti-Canadian for their own narrow political purposes. I'm saying that yes, we should fight, but instead of fighting for their, for the narrow political purposes of someone in the political class, we should actually be fighting for the things that will actually make life better for ordinary working people. Things like public auto insurance to bring down auto insurance prices, re-regulating power because we have the highest power prices in the country. Introducing a $20 an hour minimum wage because it hasn't been adjusted for inflation for 8 years, and that the wage that was supposed to hold people up is now pulling people down. These are the kind of things, and these are not radical ideas. These are ideas that have been tried, tested, and true in other jurisdictions, including some of our neighboring jurisdictions. But no one's talking about them, and that's why I refer to the political class, not just the UCP. The NDP is not talking about this stuff either. And until they become a party for working people, then I won't be as enthusiastic in offering them as an alternative. There's an opportunity here for the New Democrats, should they be willing to seize it. But and that's one of the things that we're doing at the Worker Agenda. It's like, here's a workshopped agenda based on the real concerns that working Albertans have, right? On wages, affordability, housing, public services, the jobs in the economy. Here's something that actually addresses the things that we're actually talking about over the dinner table. The New Democrats could seize it, make it their platform, take it to the next election, and they could, take that fighter pose to defend it. And I think that would be useful for them. But that's not what we're saying here. We're saying that's their choice to make. But in the meantime, on May 29th and perhaps beyond in other days of action, if we have to organize them, Albertans can come together and say, this is not good enough. We demand better. This is all bullshit. No matter how many times we hear from the grifters, like those two disreputable characters at the top of the Alberta Prosperity Project, right? I mean, those guys, I don't care if the guy wears a cowboy hat. He's not a real Albertan. I'm sorry. Like, the real Albertans, the vast majority of Albertans believe that Alberta is part of Canada. The vast majority of Albertans don't want to become the 51st state. The vast majority of Albertans believe in public health care and education. The vast majority of Albertans believe in getting paid for a decent wage for a decent day of work. They believe that wages should keep up with inflation. They believe that we should stand up to billionaires and oligarchs. That's what Albertans believe. I'm tired of being told that all Albertans believe is fighting with Ottawa and cozying up to Donald Trump. That's not my Alberta, and I don't think it's the Alberta for the majority of my fellow citizens.
Why May 29th, by the way?
Because it'll be warm.
Okay. I was like, is it the International Day of something, or is it okay?
Well, I mean,
it's logistics.
I think you've talked about the recall campaigns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they fell far short, and partly because the UCP's legislation set the threshold so high, ridiculously high, but also they were trying to collect signatures in the depths of winter,
the worst weather,
the worst possible time. And you compare it to Thomas Lukaszik's Forever Canadian campaign, which
middle of summer,
went to all the festivals. We supported that and that initiative through our unions and through the Federation of Labour, because we're on the same page as Thomas and Forever Canadian in terms of the priority of staying in Canada. But he really benefited from doing the work during the summer. It's all, I'll be honest. I mean, we picked May 29th because we're the worst it could be is rain. And of course, we're all Albertans. We know we've seen snow in every
May long weekend. We're always camping in snow.
Yeah,
so you're not guaranteed.
But it's not going to be minus 40.
It won't be minus 40. Don't you think that though that I won't get too deep into this one. We can disclose where you're off to after this. I believe, right? You're hitting the road. You're off to Fort McMurray, a center of industry in Canada. Obviously, right after you talk to us, leaving literally from our studio. Gil McGowan, our guest. If you're just joining our live stream, presented by California Closets. But don't you think that the threshold threshold should be high for recall campaigns?
I do. I'm actually not a big fan of recall campaigns. We encouraged our members to support the recall initiatives because it was a tool for expressing all the anger and energy, especially coming out of the teachers' strike and the Smith government's decision to use the notwithstanding clause to strip teachers of their democratic right to strike. Because I want to make it clear, I'll just remind your viewers that striking is legal in Canada as part of the labor relations process. It's been recognized as a democratic and constitutionally protected right as an extension of the freedom of association. And so when Daniel Smith used the notwithstanding clause to strip that right, it wasn't just an attack on the teachers, it was an attack on our democracy. And so there was all this anger. It had to go somewhere. A lot of it went to the recalls. So we supported that. But at the end of the day, what we've seen actually with Daniel Smith in her recent address to the province, these so-called direct democracy initiatives, they can be easily gamed, right? And so I mean, and I think a lot of people were frustrated because Daniel Smith announced 9 referendum questions, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 9 referendum questions, maybe more. And but she didn't have to collect 177,000 signatures for each one of those. And they were completely arbitrary in terms of what she decided. So, for example, I just went through the list of things that she's doing that she didn't get a mandate in the last election for, like the 2-tier healthcare, pulling out of CPP and the RCMP, and even changing legislation to pave the way for separatists. She actually said she wasn't going to do any of those things. So why isn't, if we're going to have referendum questions, why aren't we having referendum questions on those things? So I mean, this direct democracy stuff just allows the party in power to game the system. We're seeing it in spades from Daniel Smith. So no, I'm not a big fan of that kind of legislation.
Plain Power in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says recall is laziness on the voters' part and a result of partisanship. Get rid of party loyalty, and there's no need for recall. Interesting comment here from Marie, who says even if the recalls didn't work, they brought attention to the issues, which is definitely true. Yeah. She says, and they scared the UCP. I'm not sure they scared the UCP. I mean, no disrespect to the people collecting the signatures, but
well, let me just
I
say
think they were denigrating the effort throughout.
Yeah, well, let me say one other thing about the recalls. Even though they didn't reach their threshold, in my mind, they were not a failure, because even though they didn't hit the thresholds, they did mobilize thousands of people. And what it reminds me of is the work that we in the labor movement have to do when we organize new workplaces. So, for example, when I was a younger man, I helped organize the meatpacking plant down in Brooks. We didn't do it on the first try. It was like, I think it was a 4th try, right? But every time we went into that plant and started talking with workers, we built a base. And I think that my hat's off to everyone who was involved in those recall campaigns, because they started to build a base. They started conversations, Albertan to Albertan, saying we can demand better. There's a different way we can do things here in Alberta. We don't have to simply accept whatever's served to us by Daniel Smith or any other government in this province. We're citizens and we can participate in the democracy. And I think it needs to be looked at through that lens, that it's a step towards change. And so it's not a failure, it's a first step.
Whatever happened with, you remember back in October, I'll reference Joel Dryden's reporting here from CBC News. You had called a news conference very shortly after the province had invoked the notwithstanding clause to order teachers back to work, and you had vowed an unprecedented response as Alberta had used that notwithstanding clause, and many people were expecting like province-wide job action. I mean, your words, unprecedented response. We received a lot of feedback. No offense, Gil. A lot of people called it kind of toothless. At the end of the day, they said, where was this unprecedented response? Where is the general strike? Whatever happened with that?
Good question. And I'll point out that phrase, unprecedented response, was not just me talking off the cuff. It was taken from a joint statement that was approved unanimously by all the unions and what we call the Common Front. So the unions, public and private sector unions affiliated with Federation of Labour, but also those unions that are not affiliated. We basically had all the unions in the province meeting at the same time to talk about the teachers' strike and Bill 2, the use of the notwithstanding clause. And we knew it was coming. And so we put out this statement saying, if you go after the right to strike, you're going after our Constitution, you're going after our democratic rights. And that means that it's bigger than just the teachers, it's all of us. So we decided that we were going to take unprecedented action. But what I'll just be really blunt with you about what happened when the teacher board, and it wasn't put to the whole membership, when the teachers board decided not to defy the back to work order, the air went out of the balloon. And we had a meeting with all the Common Front unions right after that. And they basically said, if the teachers are not willing to defy the law and face the prospect of fines, how can we justify doing that with our members? Because I want to make it clear, under Canadian law, there is no such thing as a legal general strike. A general strike would be, by definition, illegal. Governments criminalized general strikes going way back to the Winnipeg general strike to strip workers of their real power, which is the power of collective action. They didn't want workers to have that power to, pressure governments through pressure on the economy. So it's been illegal for decades, right? And so if we were going to if we're going to withdraw our labor in support of the teachers in opposition to the use of the notwithstanding clause, we had to do it all together because we had no legal protection. The only protection that we would have had would have been the strength in numbers. But when the teachers, through their board, decided that it was too risky for them, and to be fair, there were big fines both for individual teachers, $500 a day. I think
$500 a day
per person
for individuals,
and then $5 million a day for the union as an institution. So even one day of a strike would have cost them about $25 million. It could have, whether or not, if it had been big enough, if enough people had participated, our argument was that there's no way that they could have fined everyone. And I think there probably would have been a lot of teachers who would have been happy to pay a $500 fine, even if it had been levied against them for one day, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know, especially after being off for 3 weeks.
After 3 weeks already.
The union didn't have a strike fund. The union did not have a strike fund. They were not getting strike pay. Well, that's kind of unheard of. Almost all of our unions have strike funds. When people are on legal strike, they got strike pay. The teachers, for historical reasons, didn't have that. So all of these things played in, right? And so
I'm not trying to start shit.
Yeah.
But were, in your estimation, and I guess I'm asking you, what did 170,000 people think about this? But in your estimation, were there other unions disappointed that the teachers didn't defy the back to work order? I mean, was that communicated to the teachers?
The short answer is yes. There was disappointment. So we had probably, I think, about 36, 37 unions around the table having this conversation. And there were some who were telling us that their members wanted to do something big. I'm not going to name them, but there were some big unions that were having conversations with their members about withdrawing labor at least for a day. And that was communicated to the teachers' leadership. But they had to make their own decision based on what they thought was best for their membership. So, but for me, I it's important that we get this straight, because, whenever something doesn't work out the way a group hopes it will, there can be a lot of finger pointing and recrimination. And we have been going through that as a labor movement. People are disappointed that we didn't have the general strike. In hindsight, we probably should have done more to explain to people that the difference between a legal strike and a general strike, and what the implications were, and how unprecedented it would have been historically. Because honestly, we haven't had a real general strike in Canada, since the Winnipeg general strike of 1919. And even then, that was just one city, and it wasn't everyone, right? And so, if I had it to do over again, I would have done more to educate people about where general strike fits in historical context. And the final thing I'll just mention is that, Canada has this reputation for being a more progressive, forward-thinking country. But when it comes to the right to strike, even among Western democracies, we actually have some of the tightest restrictions on the right to strike. So like in Western Europe, where they have general strikes on a regular basis, in countries like France and Italy and Germany, it's actually considered an extension of freedom of association and freedom of expression. And so they have the right to go on general strikes outside of their collective agreements, on occasion. That's why you see these big demonstrations in Western Europe. But here in Canada, the only time a strike is legal is in the narrow box of our labor relations system. So it's got to be a unionized workplace. It's got to be at the end of a contract. The unions have to gone through the process of bargaining, going through mediation, having a strike vote, issuing a 72-hour strike notice, all of that stuff. And then you can go on strike. But then there's also lots of constraints on that. So our governments, both federal and provincial, over decades, generations, have put a real tight box on it. So what we were proposing, the idea of a general strike, was actually something pretty radical and would have been historic. And the fact that we didn't quite get there, I mean, we actually had a debate with all those unions on that day. We had a resolution to participate in at least a one-day general strike. And it didn't pass, but and we actually withdrew it because we knew we weren't going to get consensus. But we withdrew it because people were saying, how can we justify going out on strike even for a day if the teachers aren't willing? So, once again, I want to stress, I'm not pointing fingers here. I understand why the teachers made the decisions they did, but that's sort of a direct line between. There's a direct line between that conversation in the wake of Bill 2 and what we're proposing here, right?
Yeah.
So we're not going to have a general strike, but we are going to have province-wide protest. It's not just going to be about teachers. It's not just going to be about the notwithstanding clause. We're actually creating a platform way beyond labor, because it's not just about us, it's about all of us in this province right now. The issue on that day back in October was the notwithstanding clause, was democratic rights. That's part of the mix, but it's become clear to us that there are much bigger issues to deal with. Part of it's democracy. That's part of the conversation. Inappropriate use of the notwithstanding clause to crush our constitutional rights. But healthcare, education, affordability, wages, we even have some health and safety stuff in our.
Oh, I mean, Gil, you'll have people that participate just based on the library book stuff alone, right? I mean, this is something, a collective effort where I think it'll certainly have a rallying effect. It'll also be interesting to see, to state the very obvious, by the end of May, where people's heads are at when it comes to this looming referendum and some of the action and influence that we'll see at play. So I mean, I think with every passing month, this is going to become more and more of an issue. Everything kind of culminates toward October. I mean, I think that the average audience member to this show, the host of this show, like, I'm looking toward October, and everything between here and October is going to be part of that journey.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that we chose May, because May 2nd is the day that the separatists have to have all their signatures in. We're expecting that they will meet the threshold. Because
they will.
Because Daniel Smith lowered the bar substantially for them compared to the Forever Canadian folks, right? Basically half of the signatures are necessary. So they're going to meet their bar, and that's when the separatist campaign is going to begin in earnest. So our day of action on May the 29th will be the first opportunity for Albertans across the province to say, heck no, this is all bullshit. We don't support it. And if we're successful, and as I hope we will be on May 29th in mobilizing people who don't believe in the direction we're going in this province, if we're successful in mobilizing across the province, we're thinking of doing another big province-wide day of action before the referendum vote itself on October 29th. So we're building towards something on May 29th, but we might continue building. I think we will continue building for something even bigger after that.
All right. People can check out fightbacknow.ca for more on this, or just go directly to the Alberta Federation of Labour's site, afl.org. We've been talking to President Gil McGowan right here in a special episode of Real Talk live from the historic Mercer Warehouse in downtown Edmonton. Thanks for doing this, and safe journey up to Fort Mac. I know you'll be dealing with a little bit of snow, so
okay.
Nice and easy, Gil.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks very much.
Appreciate that. And Real Talkers, again, we remind you, if you would like to check out Worker Agenda. Relay is producing this in partnership with the Alberta Federation of Labour. I'm showing you our YouTube channel here right now. You can go check that out. Of course, that's the Real Talk Ryan Jesperson YouTube channel. And you just scroll down the page. You can see here you've got our full episodes. That's Real Talk, of course, our shorts, our highlights. Thanks to the... What is it? We're closing in on 37,000 of you that subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. Boy, do we appreciate you. You could get your flamethrowers there, proudly presented by our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. That's the final episode of every week. And there you have it, Worker Agenda. Omar Mualim, a good friend of the show, is their moderator. It's co-hosted by Gil and Corey Longo from Alberta Federation of Labour, and they'll bring in guests month to month, including local union leaders for conversations on those top priorities, all part of that Worker Agenda. The most recent episode that just went out, Johnny, about 28 hours ago or so, as we're talking to you now. It's the first Sunday of every month, focusing on democracy. So a lot of talk about that Alberta separation initiative and the like. We encourage you to check that out. You can watch it on the Real Talk YouTube channel. And if you subscribe to Real Talk on podcast format, Apple, Spotify, iHeartMedia, wherever you're getting it, you'll see it clearly identified as a bonus episode. Again, the first Sunday of every month in partnership with Alberta Federation of Labour. Just a little extra something you've taken on your plate, John. We sure appreciate that. I get to just kick up my feet, watch Omar, Gil, and Corey go to work. Here. You'll push the buttons, do the edits, and but they are, in all seriousness, great conversations that they've been having. Obviously, you know, the editorial angle on that is aligning with the top priorities and the mandate of the Alberta Federation of Labour. So they opened with an episode on affordability. That was a month ago. Democracy up next, and then you can check out the website. If you check out the website, workeragenda.ca, you can see basically where that's going. Jobs in the economy, workplace health and safety, public services, democracy, taxation and royalties. They'll be talking wages as well. So, I mean, something there is bound to resonate with anybody. I'll be curious to see what happens on this May 29th province-wide day of protest. You have to imagine it'll draw a lot of people, in their own spheres of influence, their own neck of the woods, and what may draw one person out, perhaps it's, their wife is a member with the RCMP, or, maybe they have strong feelings about, remaining in Canada Pension Plan, or, for some of them, it may be an ideological sort of a conviction around the types of books that need to be available in public libraries. It'll be interesting to see how this rally cry plays out at the end of May.
I think it'll get good support. Like most of the numbers, I mean, the poll numbers are never exact, but it shows about 2/3 of, Albertans support unions, existing in some form. So, I'll be heading out there, and we'll be starting a Real Talk union the next day.
Unfortunately, I will crush that union.
He's an oligarch. He's
Jesperson, the oligarch, the union buster here at Relay. Yeah, it would be a small, but perhaps a small but mighty union. I've had an interesting career journey myself. I don't know about you, but I've been in unions. I've been outside of unions. One of the things that has always kind of driven me nuts in conversations about unions is people that just automatically and inherently oppose unions. And you hear this conversation all the time. People say, the union workers. And it's kind of like you're talking about a ton of people in a ton of different industries. And quite frankly, with a wide array of political beliefs as well. Now, you may scoff at that, and to be fair, I'm not going to bury my head in the sand. It's obvious that the Alberta Federation of Labour and its leader opposes this UCP government for obvious reasons. Gil just laid it out for like 40 minutes. It's obvious why. But keep in mind, you can't when you're speaking generally about union members, like you're talking about a lot of workers in oil and gas as an example. You'd be talking about a lot of auto sector workers, right? You'd be talking about first responders in a lot of cases. I mean, union workers, electrical workers, just obviously tons. So that's one of the things that's always kind of bugged me when people talk, someone just inherently oppose a union. I just think that sometimes we need to sort of pause and reflect a little bit on who we're talking about, which is why I think that was an important question to ask Gil. Plain Power says people hate, quote unquote, hate unions due to a lack of knowledge. It says, I'm being polite in putting it that way.
People hate
Just Joe says unions are why you have like weekends off and vacations, as an example. So, yeah. Let us know what you think to talk at RyanJesperson.com. Interesting to hear Gil talk about the recall campaigns as well, saying that he's not necessarily a fan of those.
I think we all knew they weren't necessarily going to be successful, but a lot of the times, protest and just standing up and having your voice heard, it's more like the spirit of it, right?
Yeah.
We know it's not necessarily going to. I mean, it hardly ever, rarely, it never topples governments, but it's to be heard, right? It's to show that, you're not agreeing with what's going on in your community.
Totally. And Bastian, thank you for your YouTube channel membership. Says I'm non-unionized in a heavily unionized industry. Says I benefit so much because of unionization efforts. I've struggled to figure out a path to unionizing my own department, but the benefits overall are huge. That from Ambustian. 54, what is this? 554-9RR, great handle. I think a lot of folks are being assigned handles in our live chat, and so they're not preferring this. So I apologize if I'm missing the reference there. 549RR says basically the union anti-union discourse is just othering, like immigration. Others are pointing out, Ms. KD says BC is far less anti-union.
Well, yeah, support for unions. Let's be honest; it's the lowest tier in this province. So
yeah. But I don't think a lot of people think of who you're talking about. Like when people talk about union workers, or like the general, like sort of the the general themes around criticism of unions is that they're too political. They deploy their capital to try to influence elections, right? Acting as sort of basically third-party advertisers. People think that a lot of union workers are lazy. That's kind of the trope that they'll push out there. But you're also, you're talking about a ton of people that vote conservative every single time. You're talking about a bunch of people that are far from lazy. I just don't think that there's like an accurate understanding, or I think a lot of people, and many of us can fall into this. We allow ourselves to just conveniently ignore certain realities. And so when you paint all union workers with one brush in a province like Alberta, you just, I guess, pretend that there's not thousands of union workers, for example, working in Alberta's oil sands.
100%. And I didn't mean support was lowest in Alberta. I meant like just density. Yeah. We see the numbers. The density of unions is just it's the lowest in this province. Another reason why we need someone like Gil and the Alberta Federation of Labour speaking up for those that do exist.
Yeah, and this is also an opportunity for us to point out that the views and opinions that are expressed in Worker Agenda released by Relay are not necessarily shared by those of us at Relay and our advertising partners. We are simply producing the episodes and making them available to our engaged and informed audience.
Oligarch.
How did I do on that?
I'm just kidding.
549RR says they'll tell me later what the handle means. I don't know what that means, but I appreciate it. It's very exciting. Yeah. Bunny Slipper says conservatives just have better marketing teams. They've always had that. This would be a clap back to that, certainly, what the AFL is rolling out here. I like this handle. Working Class Guy says, I've worked both union and non-union jobs, and most of the hatred I saw toward union is 100% on ideology, not on practicality.
Nice.
Yeah. Deaf Tiger's wondering if we could see actual comparison checks from different industries. Says Jespo, could you please find actual real checks? Are you talking like pay stubs from union and non-union employees? It would be interesting to see taxes taken to union dues. MetaModern says unions are the agreement made between capital and labor, so labor doesn't drag the boss out of his house when working conditions become intolerable. Ms. Katie says if not for unions, we wouldn't have legislation for things like safety, hours, vacation, age restrictions. 100% right. You see some critics say that, while unions have kind of served their purpose, right? They're like, it's not the Industrial Revolution anymore. Unions have kind of got to the point, and now there's bloat, and you got the union fat cats. You hear all the kind of diatribes, right? But, a situation like this with Worker Agenda and with that Fight Back campaign is the Alberta Federation of Labour Labour, I think here looking to establish influence and, of course, a rallying cry. So you can let us know what you think about it again, workeragenda.ca.
And thank you, unions, for way back in the day giving us weekends, because I had how was your weekend?
And
I
for
had a nice
keeping
weekend.
like 5-year-olds away from working as chimney sweeps.
Shrapnel.
I think that was also
in a factory.
That was also a positive step. I think keeping 5- and 6-year-olds off job sites. And I'm not even trying to be cute. I recognize in some parts of the world that's still an issue. How about this from I'm going to read the comment anyway, but I just really want to read the handle because Fanny Pack Fletch. I need to meet this person. Fanny Pack Fletch. What do you have in your fanny pack? So since this is a sort of an employment-esque themed segment. Says, I love this. Talking about community in our live chat. Says, if anybody knows an opportunity with a great company in sales and marketing, please share. I am in my 3rd week of my sabbatical, says Fanny Pack Fletch, and I am starting to lose my mind.
Okay.
Fanny Pack Fletch, I fully support you popping that into our live chat, into this community. And if a job comes or an opportunity or an interview as a result, I implore you to pass it along to us as a praise report to be featured in Positive Reflections. Johnny, that's where I want to go right now because this is like a circle back. I love this. This is a throwback from Cheryl, a wonderful friend of the show. You know, first episode of every single week, courtesy of our friends at Solar by Kubi, we focus on a positive, like a praise report. Sometimes it's a random act of kindness or a story of someone paying it forward. And that is the case with this one. Cheryl writes in to talk@ryanjesperson.com, and her subject really caught our attention. It says, I put Real Talk support into action. Cheryl. So we open the email. She says, Jess, well, I don't just listen to Real Talk. I try out the endorsements and I check out services that are featured by many of your guests. And the jury's in. She says, my life is better as a result. Can you tell podcast listeners that I'm smiling as I'm reading this? Cheryl says, right now, as I write you this, we've got a lovely and brilliant PhD student that's renting a room in our home because of your guests from an episode on May 24th, 2024. Johnny, I'm showing it right now on the screen. That is Elev Homes co-founder Jean-Bruce Kua that you're seeing on the screen. The episode is titled, What's the Best Advice You've Ever Received? This was an episode in partnership with Edmonton Unlimited, and Jean-Bruce joined us, speaking on behalf of Elev Homes, also founders around our Real Talk Roundtable from My Fertility Labs and Gummy Nutrition Lab. And it was an episode intended to inspire entrepreneurs and risk takers and visionaries. And boy, did it ever resonate with Cheryl. So Elev Homes has created a really neat platform where those that are seeking affordable accommodations are able to connect with those that are looking to put reputable, reliable young people into their homes, into their spare rooms, their basement suites, their revenue properties, what have you. Cheryl says we took the initiative from the episode. Right now, our tenant Laura is here until the summer. Says she would just be, by the way, a wonderful guest on Real Talk. I like that Cheryl's going there. It says real people giving real endorsements of the quality guests and topics on Real Talk. She says, I don't know if Laura would agree. She seems up for anything, but she's very busy now, including weekly hikes that she's been enjoying in polar weather with the Edmonton Trail Community Plus. She says she's got her doctoral research, which is what brought her to Edmonton, using pineapple yeast to make beer. Pineapple yeast to make beer. How cool is that? Cheryl says, Jess, well, please keep spreading good. Both you and Johnny, Real Talk is changing the world one episode at a time. Cheryl, we are thrilled to hear that Laura is found a wonderful home alongside you and your family, that you and your family have found a wonderful tenant with Laura, and that it was that May 24th, 2024 episode titled, What's the Best Advice You've Ever Received, that made it happen. We call these our praise reports, and we absolutely love them. Thanks for sharing with us. If you have a positive reflection, maybe it's like Cheryl, something you took from the show, tell us about it in an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. You could be featured in a future Positive Reflection, proudly presented by Solar by Kuby. A reminder, if you're looking to get solar panels up on your roof this spring or summer, now is the time to visit kuby.ca. That's KUBY.ca for a free solar quote. Get your name on the install list so you can start keeping more money in your pocket. Coming up on the next episode of the show, we're going to ask Max Fawcett, why the big swipe at Naheed Nenshi? Max says it's time to step up or step down. We asked Nenshi about it in our most recent episode of the show. If you saw that, you know that, well, he didn't really appreciate it. So we'll get the other side from the author himself. We hope you'll join us then. In the meantime, make it a great Monday, Real Talkers, and thanks for checking out the show.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive producer Josh Dunford. Technical producer John Hicks. General manager Katie Cook-Chivers. Account coordinator Lawrence Derlego. Human resources Lena Shepard. Website design Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton.